Welcome, brave soul. I am the forgotten storyteller. Before we begin, tap that like button if you dare, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. And if you make it to the end of this video, I hope to see you in the next story. I hope you're ready, because I am. Let's begin. You hear her before you ever see her. Not footsteps, those are too ordinary. It's the sound of someone dragging their fingernails along your bones from the inside out. That's the way people who survived her speak of her, if they can speak at all. Most don't. And if you're unlucky enough to feel that sound instead of hear it, you're already hers. Our story today begins in the dying autumn of 1999, when the leaves in Hollowford, Massachusetts, were brittle enough to crumble into dust at the slightest touch, and the air seemed thick with something that wasn't quite smoke and wasn't quite fog. It's the kind of season where death hides behind every wind-blown leaf pile, waiting for the moment when night takes over. Emily Cross was 21, and by day she was just another face in the crowd. A college junior with dark chestnut hair, denim jackets, and the slight permanent squint of someone who read too much late at night. She had friends. She had classes. She laughed in all the right places. And if you looked close enough, her skin seemed to carry that healthy, warm flush people get from living clean, easy lives. But only in the daylight. After sunset, something in Emily's blood woke up. It wasn't just hunger, it was command. Her muscles moved differently, like a predator ready to leap. Her eyes lost their human warmth, their color deepening into something that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. And inside her chest, where a heartbeat should be steady, the rhythm slowed to a patient, waiting throb. She didn't just need to feed, she wanted to. That October, the disappearances began. The first was a drifter found in the drainage ditch by the old railway. His body was drained so completely that the coroner said his veins looked like collapsed straws. Then came a woman who had been walking home from the factory night shift. Her shoes found neatly placed on her front step, but her body 2 miles away, her neck torn open as though something had knotted. No one connected it to Emily. Why would they? She was polite. She smiled. She volunteered once a month at the library's children's reading hour. She wasn't the type to stalk the back alleys after dark. Except she did, every night. She would wait until the clock read exactly 11:13 p.m., never earlier, never later, and then the hunger was too loud to ignore. She'd slip out into the cold air, her breath no longer visible in the October chill, because she no longer needed it. And yet, even predators can feel watched. It started as flickers in her peripheral vision. A shadow pacing her from across the street. A figure, long and thin, standing beneath the burnt-out street lamp at the corner of Lincoln and Mason. Whenever she turned to look, he was gone. But the longer she hunted, the closer he seemed to get. One night, Emily cornered a man in the abandoned textile factory, a young vagrant, his voice shaking as he asked if she could spare a few dollars. Her lips parted, revealing the sharpness of teeth that didn't belong in a human mouth when she felt it. Warm and slow a breath. On the back of her neck. She spun around. The man was there, tall, wrapped in a long black trench coat, his face shadowed by the brim of a fedora. There was no light in his eyes. No movement. Just the suggestion of a smile that wasn't friendly. "You're sloppy," he said in a voice that sounded too deep for one throat. "And you're not the only one feeding in this town." Emily's hunger snarled inside her like a caged animal. She lunged, but he wasn't there. One blink and the space was empty, the man vanished, and her prey had bolted. The next morning, she woke up in her dorm room. Her sheets were streaked with mud and blood she didn't remember spilling. She stared at her reflection in the mirror above the sink, and the girl staring back at her smiled, even though Emily's mouth was closed. The voice in her head spoke for the first time. "You're not strong enough yet." She staggered back from the mirror, her chest tight. That week, Sarah, her best friend since freshman year, noticed the change. Sarah was bright, warm, always smelling faintly of citrus shampoo. She asked Emily why she'd been skipping classes, why her skin looked so pale, why her eyes seemed darker than they used to be. Emily laughed it off, claiming she was just tired, but Sarah kept watching her. And then the killings escalated. It wasn't just vagrants or the unlucky anymore. One night, a couple walking home from a late movie never made it to their apartment. Their bodies were found in their locked bedroom the next morning, pale as porcelain, the sheets soaked through. Emily knew she hadn't done it. She had fed the night before. But the police didn't care about fine distinctions between monsters. She remembered the pale man's words, "You're not the only one feeding." The fear crept in then, not fear of being caught, but fear that she wasn't the apex predator she thought she was. Something else was hunting here, and it was better at it than she was. 2 nights later, she saw him again. This time he was inside her territory, an alley just behind the diner, where the dumpsters hid the smell of fresh blood. He was standing perfectly still, his hands clasped in front of him as if waiting for her. "You're breaking apart," he said almost kindly. "The longer you fight the hunger, the more she takes over." Emily's pulse froze. She asked. The man tilted his head. "The other you. The one that moves when you're asleep. The one that hunts before the sun is even down." And then he was gone. That night, Emily dreamed, at least she thought it was a dream. She was in the textile factory again, but this time she was watching herself from above, like a bird circling carrion. Her own body was crouched over something, someone. She heard a scream cut short, and when her double looked up, her mouth was smeared red, her fangs longer, her face thinner, hungrier, more feral. It smiled at her and in her own voice said, "Soon you'll sleep forever." Emily woke with a scream, and her hands were wet with blood. She didn't know whose. As November gave way to December, and Hollowford began its slow crawl toward the new millennium. The streets were strung with strands of cheap Christmas lights, half of them flickering, some dead entirely. Stores plastered their windows with bright posters about Y2K survival kits, canned goods, bottled water, batteries, and little pocket radios. The air buzzed with the same nervousness you feel before a thunderstorm breaks, that heavy pause when even the birds seem to fall silent. Emily was restless. The hunger wasn't cycling anymore, it wasn't something she could time. It came in unpredictable surges, sometimes in the middle of the afternoon, sometimes right before dawn. She'd catch herself staring at the pulse in someone's throat during lectures, her nails digging crescent moons into her palms to keep from lunging. Sarah confronted her after class one day, pulling her into the stairwell where the yellowed fluorescent lights hummed overhead. "You're not sleeping," Sarah said. "You're different. I saw you last night. You weren't walking home. You were..." She stopped herself, searching Emily's face for a human reaction. "What did you see?" Emily asked, her voice flat. Sarah swallowed. "You were climbing. Like a spider, Emily. Up the side of the library. And your face." Emily's hands tightened into fists. She wanted to deny it, but deep down she knew Sarah wasn't lying. That other her was slipping further into the daylight, breaking the rules she thought were unbreakable. That night, Emily followed the pale man. She trailed him down Lincoln Street, past the boarded-up gas station and the old brick post office, his steps soundless despite the frozen leaves crunching underfoot. He led her to a church, or rather what used to be a church. Its stained glass windows were smashed, and its wooden doors hung crooked on their hinges. Inside, the smell was overpowering, iron and rot and damp stone. Candles burned in uneven clusters along the altar, casting long shadows that seemed to bend unnaturally around the walls. And there, laid out like offerings, were bodies. 5 of them. They weren't drained, not entirely. Their skin was marked with black veins radiating from puncture wounds, their eyes glassy and half open. "What is this?" Emily whispered. The pale man stepped into the candlelight, and for the first time she saw his face. It was totally wrong. Not disfigured in any way, not monstrous, but too perfect, too symmetrical, the way a mannequin might look if it decided to breathe. "This," he said, "is what happens when you don't feed right. The other one, your shadow, she doesn't finish them. She leaves them like this, half dead, half alive. It keeps them screaming, in their heads." Emily took a step back. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because when she's strong enough, she won't need you anymore. She'll keep you in a corner of your own mind, just awake enough to know what she's doing." His eyes bored into hers. "And you'll like it." Before Emily could respond, a sound echoed through the church, a wet, animal rasp. She turned toward it. Between 2 shattered pews, something moved. Her shadow self crawled into view. Its limbs were too long, its nails like black glass. The face was hers, but starved, the skin stretched tight over bone. Its mouth split into a grin that exposed fangs longer than any Emily had ever seen in the mirror. The pale man moved between them, his coat swirling like ink in water. "You can't kill her," he said without looking at Emily. "You share the same heart." The creature lunged, not at Emily but at him. The candles flared and went out, and for a heartbeat the church was pure black. Then the fight began. Emily saw it in flashes, his hands like claws raking across the creature's ribs, her shadow's head snapping forward to sink its teeth into his neck, the spray of dark red blood hitting the altar. And then silence. When the candles relit themselves, both of them were gone. Only the bodies remained, their black veins pulsing faintly. Emily ran. Over the next weeks, things unraveled faster. She began losing time, entire hours disappearing from her memory. She'd wake up in strange places: the roof of the library, the middle of the frozen pond in the park, once in the cemetery, kneeling before a grave she didn't recognize. Sarah's boyfriend, Mark, vanished. The police canvassed the area, found no trace. Sarah came to Emily's room that night, her face streaked with tears. "You know something," she said. "I don't care if it sounds insane, I know you know." Emily opened her mouth to lie, and smelled blood on Sarah's clothes. Not Mark's. Her own praise. The other her had been close. New Year's Eve arrived like a funeral procession. Snow drifted over the streets in a slow, steady fall. The bars downtown were packed, music and laughter spilling into the icy air, but in the alleys between them it was silent. Emily locked herself inside the textile factory, chaining the doors from the inside. She'd decided, no feeding tonight. If she could make it through until dawn, maybe she could fight this thing back. The clock ticked toward midnight, and then she heard Sarah's voice outside calling her name. It wasn't right. The tone was too sweet, too steady. Sarah should have been shivering, teeth chattering in the cold. Instead, each syllable rolled in like honey over pancakes. Emily's breath quickened. She moved to the door but didn't open it. "Sarah?" "I saw her," the voice said. "You should see what she's doing." Something scraped along the wall outside, nails dragging across brick. Emily backed away from the door. The chain rattled. She knew she hadn't touched it. And then the metal gave way, not broken but unlocked from the inside. The factory's darkness swallowed the doorway. Sarah stepped in, but her shadow on the floor didn't match her body. It was taller, thinner, its head cocked at an angle unnatural for a human neck. Emily's own shadow peeled itself from her feet. The factory air was stale and cold, smelling of rust and mildew. Somewhere in the shadows, water dripped steadily into a metal bucket, a metronome counting down to midnight. Emily stepped backward as her shadow slid free from her feet, rising to full height. It wasn't just a copy, it was more. Taller, sharper, its face pulled into that unnatural grin, as though it had been stretching its mouth wider each night. Sarah stood still, her eyes glassy, her breathing shallow. Emily called her name again, but Sarah didn't move. The shadow stepped closer instead, its nails clicking faintly on the concrete floor. "You've been good," it said in her voice, but deeper, thick with amusement. "You've been feeding me, making me strong." Emily shook her head. "You're not me." It tilted its head. "No, I am not, I'm what's left when you're gone." The pale man's voice came from behind the shadow. "It's midnight." The old factory clock began its countdown to the new year, the clang of its bell echoing through the empty space. Each chime made the shadow twitch as though it were drawing strength from the sound. Sarah's mouth opened then, but no words came out. Instead, the shadow's voice poured from her lips. "You think you can keep me locked away? You can't. You've been falling asleep earlier and earlier. Soon, there won't be a day left for you to wake into." The 9th bell rang. The pale man moved forward, something glinting in his hand, a long, thin blade of silver that seemed to shiver in the dim light. "It can be killed," he said. "But only if you do it." Emily stared at him. "You said we share the same heart." He nodded. "And you'll lose yours in the process." The 10th bell rang. The shadow lunged. Emily rolled aside, the claws slashing sparks from the floor where she'd been standing. Sarah swayed on her feet, the shadows tethered to her visible now, a long black vein of smoke stretching from Sarah's chest to the shadow's spine. The 11th bell rang. Emily grabbed the blade. It burned her skin instantly, the smell of scorched flesh rising into the air. The shadow laughed, circling her. "Do it, fucking end it. Or watch your friend become my daylight mask." The 12th bell rang. Emily ran. Not away from it. She drove the blade forward, straight into the shadow's chest. For a heartbeat, its face was hers again, wide-eyed, almost pleading. Then the black smoke tether ripped free from Sarah and the thing collapsed, crumbling into dust that swirled once in the factory air before vanishing entirely. Emily fell to her knees, gasping. The blade clattered to the floor. Her heart hammered in her ears, and then stopped. She didn't fall unconscious. She didn't die in any way that felt final. Every sound in the room grew sharper, every sense stronger. She could hear Sarah's blood moving under her skin. The pale man knelt beside her. "She's gone," he said. "But now there's no one left to hold the hunger back." Sarah's voice came in a trembling whisper. "Emily?" Emily turned to her friend. The look on Sarah's face told her everything. Her eyes had gone completely black. The year 2000 began in silence in Hollowford. Snow drifted through the broken factory windows. Sarah stumbled out into the street, breathing hard, unsure if she'd actually been saved. Behind her, Emily remained in the shadows, watching. She no longer felt the difference between night and day. She no longer cared. The pale man's coat fluttered once in the cold wind as he followed her into the dark. In the months that followed, people kept disappearing. No patterns, no warnings. Some bodies were found drained entirely. Others were left with black veins spidering under their skin, whispering things no living throat could form. And if you stood on the corner of Lincoln and Mason late enough at night, sometimes you'd see her, tall, beautiful, smiling, her eyes like deep pools of ink. But if you saw her shadow move a second before she did, it was already too late.
Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts? Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare.